Everything you were taught about America's greatest heroes? Half of it is a lie. The faces on your money, the names on your schools, the legends in your history books. They hid secrets so dark your teachers would never dare say them out loud. The man who built America's moon rocket? A Nazi SS officer. Helen Keller, the symbol of hope. Supported letting disabled babies die. The father of modern medicine performed surgeries on enslaved women with zero anesthesia. Thomas Edison? He publicly electrocuted animals just to smear his rival. And Christopher Columbus? He chopped the hands off anyone who didn't bring him enough gold. That's just 5. I found 71, and I promise number 30 will make your stomach turn. Stay till the end. 1. J. Marion Sims. They literally call this guy the father of gynecology, which sounds respectable until you learn how he earned the title. He perfected his surgical techniques by operating on enslaved women, repeatedly, without anesthesia, because apparently their pain didn't count in his little medical ledger. And for over a century, cities put up statues of him. Statues. Kids on field trips looked up at that bronze face and got told he was a genius. Sure, a genius who built his legacy on people who couldn't say no. Nothing says hero like a resume that reads exactly like a war crimes filing. 2. Helen Keller, the one story you got in school was the water pump. Heartwarming, inspiring, a whole movie's worth. What they skipped is that she was a vocal supporter of eugenics, and in 1915 she publicly defended letting a disabled infant die rather than be treated. Read that twice. The woman held up as the ultimate symbol of overcoming disability argued some disabled lives weren't worth saving. The irony is so thick you could stand a spoon in it. Turns out inspirational posters leave out the parts that don't fit on a poster. Shocking, I know. 3. Wernher von Braun. America's moon rocket hero, the man who got us to the stars. What the celebration tour tends to skip is that before he was designing NASA's dreams, he was an actual SS officer, and his earlier rockets were built by concentration camp prisoners worked to death as slave labor. But hey, he waved a magic wand, hopped a plane to Alabama, and suddenly he's a wholesome American visionary. We didn't just forgive the past, we handed him a corner office and a rocket program. One small step for man hits a little different when you know who was standing behind the curtain. 4. P.T. Barnum. The showman, the greatest showman. They made a glittery musical about him with singing and everything. His actual launch to fame? Exhibiting an enslaved woman named Joyce Heth, claiming she was 161 years old, parading her like a carnival attraction. And when she died, he didn't stop. He sold tickets to her public autopsy, charged admission to watch a human body get cut open. That's your feel-good matinee hero. Somehow, step right up, watch a corpse for 50 cents. Didn't make the final cut of the movie. Can't imagine why they left that number off the soundtrack. 5. Christopher Columbus. The man got a whole federal holiday. He discovered America origin story, the works. Small detail they never mentioned during Arts and Crafts Hour. He demanded gold tributes from the native people he encountered, and if they didn't bring enough, he had their hands cut off. Left them to bleed. This is the guy we told kids sailed the ocean blue like it was a nursery rhyme. He didn't even land where you think he did. But sure, let's keep the parade. Nothing celebrates exploration like a man who turned quota enforcement into mutilation. 6. Abraham Lincoln. Honest Abe. The noble face on the penny, the great emancipator. And yes, real complexity here. But the schoolbook halo skips one enormous thing. In 1862, he approved the execution of 38 Dakota men, hanged simultaneously in the single largest mass execution in American history. In one day. He reviewed the list personally. The saintly log cabin hero has that on the ledger, and somehow it never made it onto the memorial. Turns out, of the people, by the people, came with an asterisk, and the fine print was written in a place nobody wanted to read aloud. 7. George Washington, the father of the country, the cannot tell a lie, cherry tree kid, the man on the dollar bill. Here's a delightful one they left out of the wooden teeth legend. Those famous dentures weren't wood at all. Some of the teeth were pulled from people he enslaved. Real human teeth taken from people who had no choice, sitting in the mouth of the guy we call the model of virtue. Every time you saw that stern portrait, you were looking at a smile built from other people's suffering. But please, tell me more about the cherry tree. 8. Henry Ford, the assembly line genius. The put America on wheels. Hero, a name on every road trip. What the museum gift shop won't mention is that he was so aggressively anti-Semitic that he published and distributed hate propaganda for years. So much so that Hitler kept a portrait of Ford on his office wall and praised him by name in Mein Kampf. Let that sit. A dictator's role model, framed and hung. When the guy running the Third Reich lists you as inspiration, that's not a footnote. That's the whole headline. But sure, admire the cars. 9. John D. Rockefeller, the richest man in history, the great philanthropist, the guy who invented modern charity. Lovely image. Slightly less lovely is the Ludlow massacre, tied to his company, where a tent camp of striking miners was attacked and the wives and children sheltering there died in the assault, burned and shot in a camp. And then the PR machine spun up donations in libraries to buff the name back to shiny. You can fund 1,000 foundations and it still doesn't unhappen. Nothing launders a reputation like enough money to build the museum that tells your version. 10. Paul Revere. The Midnight Ride. The lone hero galloping through the night shouting the British are coming. Stirring stuff. Also mostly fiction. Revere never even finished the ride. He was captured partway through by a British patrol. The legend you memorized came from a poem written 85 years later by Longfellow, who needed a hero and a rhyme scheme more than he needed the facts. So an entire national myth is basically fan fiction with good marketing. The real writers who actually made it get 0 pennies, 0 poems. History remembers the guy who got caught. 11. Henry David Thoreau, the patron saint of nature. Go live deliberately in the woods. The guy every hiking quote Instagram account worships. Here's a gorgeous bit of irony. In 1844, this great lover of the wilderness accidentally set the Concord woods on fire and burned roughly 300 acres to the ground. 300! The man who lectured everyone about living gently with nature torched a small forest because he couldn't manage a cooking fire. Walden's beautiful and all, but maybe leave out the part where the author personally barbecued the landscape. Local townsfolk called him Woods Burner for years, deservedly. 12. John Muir, the father of national parks, the gentle bearded prophet of the mountains, Sierra Club royalty. Genuine conservation legacy, sure, but the sanded-down version skips his writings, where he described black and native people in openly racist, dehumanizing terms, treating the people who'd lived on that land for millennia as scenery to be cleared. His untouched wilderness was only untouched because someone got removed first. The Sierra Club itself eventually admitted this out loud. Turns out the guy who wanted nature pristine had some very ugly ideas about who counted as part of it. Beautiful prose, rotten footnotes. 13. General Patton. Old blood and guts, the tough-talking war hero, the guy Hollywood gave a giant flag in a monologue. Very inspiring. Slightly less inspiring, he walked into military hospitals and slapped 2 soldiers suffering from shell shock, screaming at them as cowards for having what we now call PTSD. Struck wounded men in their beds. It nearly ended his entire career, and it should have. The genius tactician couldn't grasp that a broken mind is a wound too. But the movie gives him swelling music and a speech, so I guess we've all agreed to forget the hospital. 14. Walt Disney. The man behind the mouse, childhood itself, the smiling uncle of American wholesomeness. Here's a magical little secret. During the Red Scare, he named suspected communist colleagues to Congress and served as an FBI informant for years, feeding the Bureau information on people in his own industry. The guy who built a kingdom on happiness spent his spare time helping ruin careers over politics. Every happiest place on earth ticket comes with a side of, also snitch to the feds. Somehow, that ride's not in the park. Wonder why they never built the informant coaster. 15. Buffalo Bill Cody. The Wild West showman, the frontier hero, the star of his own traveling spectacle. Charming, right up until you learn how the act started. In 1876, he scalped a Cheyenne man and then toured the country reenacting it on stage, billing it as the first scalp for Custer. He turned a killing into a nightly performance and sold tickets. Made a fortune romanticizing the slaughter of the very people he'd fought. The Wild West you picture, the whole mythology, why, was literally invented by a man cashing in on real blood. Showbiz, baby. 16. Andrew Jackson, the people's president, the rugged populist, the seventh face they slapped on the $20 bill. Real folksy hero energy. Then you read one of his runaway slave advertisements where he offered a reward for the return of an enslaved man, plus a bonus, extra pay for every 100 lashes given to him, up to 300. He priced human torture like a coupon. This is the guy on your money, the one who also forced the Trail of Tears, but let's stay focused. He literally itemized whippings, and we keep him in our wallets. Cozy, 17. Thomas Jefferson, author of All Men Are Created Equal, the Enlightenment genius, the Monticello philosopher. Beautiful words. Here's the part that took DNA in 1998 to make undeniable. He fathered at least 6 children with Sally Hemings, a woman he enslaved, who could not freely consent to anything involving the man who legally owned her. He wrote soaring lines about liberty by day and held people as property by night, including his own children. The man who penned the case against tyranny was running a small one at home. Created Equal apparently had a very short guest list. 18. Thomas Edison, the great inventor, the light bulb wizard. Genius is 1% inspiration. Inspiring. Also a ruthless PR operator who, to smear his rival's alternating current electricity, publicly electrocuted animals to make AC look deadly. He staged these grim demonstrations to scare the public and protect his own money, essentially killing creatures for marketing. The friendly school book genius ran a fear campaign with a body count of pets and livestock. Nikola Tesla was over there actually inventing the future while Edison was hosting the world's worst petting zoo. But sure, the light bulb. Let's talk about the light bulb. 19. Samuel Colt, the gunmaker who won the West, the great American industrialist, the name still stamped on firearms. Rugged patriotic stuff. Here's a detail the brand mythology skips. Right up to the eve of the Civil War, he kept happily selling weapons to Southern buyers, cheerfully arming a region openly preparing to break the country apart. Profit didn't care which side pulled the trigger. The great American icon was fine equipping the people about to shoot at America as long as the checks cleared. Patriotism's a beautiful thing, but apparently it clocks out the second the invoice comes in. 20. Clara Barton, founder of the American Red Cross, the angel of the battlefield, pure humanitarian sainthood. Genuinely did enormous good, to be fair. But the tidy legend leaves off the ending. In 1904, she was forced to resign from the very organization she built, amid accusations of mismanaging its funds. Pushed out of her own creation under a financial cloud. Doesn't erase the good she did, but it's a lot messier than the halo suggests. Founders getting shoved out the door of their own institutions is apparently a very American tradition. Even the saints got a going-away shove. 21. Nikola Tesla, the tortured genius, the man who basically invented the modern electrical world, the internet's favorite underdog. And here's the heartbreak they skip. He died broke and alone in a New York hotel room, having spent his final years having fallen deeply, genuinely, in love with a pigeon. A specific white pigeon he said loved him back. The man who dreamed up wireless power couldn't hold on to a dollar or a friend, and the greatest mind of his age ended it whispering to a bird. We meme him as a hero now. Nobody funded him then. Cool priorities, humanity. 22. Susan B. Anthony, the face of women's suffrage, the heroine on the coin nobody uses, pure feminist icon. Real pioneer, no question. But the polished statue skips the ugly strategy. She and her circle actively opposed the vote for black men, using openly racist arguments to argue white women deserved the ballot first. She played one oppressed group against another to climb ahead. The fight for everyone's rights had a very selective definition of everyone. Turns out the suffrage sisterhood came with a whites first membership clause. History loves to hand out halos before it reads the whole speech. 23. General MacArthur, the World War II legend. I shall return. The corncob pipe hero draped in medals. Very grand. Here's a small stain the statues omit. In 1932, he led active duty troops to violently drive out the bonus army. But UW. Veterans and their wives and children camped in Washington, peacefully asking for the pay they were promised. He turned tanks and gas on his own veterans, on the exact men he'd once commanded. The great soldier's soldier attacked the soldiers. When your resume includes assaulted starving veterans and their kids, maybe skip the parade float that year. 24. Dr. Seuss, the beloved rhyming uncle of childhood, green eggs, the cat in the hat, pure innocent whimsy. Adorable. Less adorable. During World War II, he drew wartime cartoons so viciously racist, especially toward Japanese people, that his own estate later pulled several of his books from publication. His own family looked at the work and said, "Yeah, we can't sell this." The man who taught kids, a person's a person, no matter how small, apparently had exceptions. The whimsical hats came later. The ugly caricatures came first. Turns out the good doctor's early sketchbook needed a warning label of its own. 25. Kit Carson, the great frontiersman, the rugged scout, the name on towns and counties and mountains. Heroic explorer vibes. What the legend buries is that he ran a brutal scorched earth campaign against the Navajo, burning their crops, homes, and orchards to starve them into surrender, then forcing them onto the deadly 300-mile long walk, where many died. He didn't discover the West. He helped empty it. The rugged trailblazer of the postcards was, in practice, the enforcement arm of ethnic cleansing. But we named a national forest after him, so I'm sure it's fine. Real hero stuff. 26. FDR, the New Deal savior, four-term legend, the reassuring voice that carried America through the Depression and the war. Enormous legacy, genuinely. But there's one signature the fireside chats don't mention. He signed the executive order that imprisoned roughly 120,000 Japanese Americans in internment camps. Citizens, families, kids, rounded up and locked away for the crime of their ancestry, losing homes and businesses they never got back. The great defender of freedom personally authorized one of its biggest domestic betrayals. Turns out, the only thing we have to fear had a footnote, and 120,000 people got to live in it. 27. Benjamin Franklin, the lovable founding grandpa, kite and key genius, wit, inventor, diplomat, the whole charming package. Delightful. Here's a chillier one. He fathered an illegitimate son, William, raised him, made him a royal governor, and then permanently disowned him for staying loyal to Britain during the Revolution. Never reconciled, never forgave. The father of American compromise couldn't manage it with his own kid. The man who charmed all of France and united the colonies died estranged from his own son over politics. So warm and folksy, right up until you crossed him. Then it was ice, forever. 28. Alexander Graham Bell, the man who invented the telephone, the name every phone company practically bows to. Clean, tidy hero story. Except it's genuinely murky. He filed his phone patent the exact same day as a rival, Elisha Gray. And serious doubts about who actually invented the thing first have never fully died. There are allegations Bell got a peek at Gray's filing. The sole genius narrative might be a foot race he barely, or shadily, won. So the guy we credit for the whole thing may have just been faster to the patent office. Fitting, really, for the man who invented calling people. 29. Howard Hughes, the dashing aviator filmmaker, the billionaire playboy, the daredevil who broke flight records and dated movie stars. What a life! What the glamour reel cuts away from is the ending. He spent his final years a germophobic, malnourished recluse, letting his hair and nails grow out, hiding in darkened rooms terrified of contamination. The man who couldn't stop moving ended up unable to leave a chair. All that money and daring collapsed into a paranoid shell wasting away in the dark. The heroic mythology loves the takeoff. It always seems to land the camera before the crash. 30. Jesse Owens, the Olympic legend who humiliated Hitler's racial fantasy on his own turf in 1936, one of the great heroic moments in sports. Real triumph. Here's the gut punch nobody frames. He came home to a country that still segregated him, got no endorsements, no parades that paid the bills, and ended up so broke he raced against horses at carnivals for money. The man who outran the world for cash sprints against livestock at halftime. America cheered the medal and then let the hero go hungry. Nothing says land of the free like making your champion outrun a racehorse for rent. 31. Doc Holliday, the legendary Old West gunfighter, the deadly gambler at the OK Corral, all steely-eyed cowboy mystique. Very cool. Here's the delightfully uncool origin. Before he was killing men in dusty shootouts, he was a trained, licensed dentist. A dentist. Picture the most feared gunslinger in the West gently telling you to floss more. Tuberculosis pushed him out of the practice and into gambling halls, and the rest became legend. So the terror of the frontier started his career peering into people's molars. Somehow Doc hits different when you realize it wasn't a nickname. The man had an actual degree in teeth. 32. Sam Houston, the towering Texas hero, the man cities and statues are named for, the great founding father of the Lone Star State. Grand. What the monuments skip is his messy middle chapter. He resigned Tennessee's governorship in disgrace, then went to live among the Cherokee, who watched his drinking and nicknamed him Big Drunk. Not exactly the inscription they carve on the courthouse. The great statesman had a full stretch where his defining trait, per the people around him, was the bottle. Texas loves a comeback story, so they just quietly trimmed the part where their hero's tribe-given name was basically wasted. 33. George Custer, the tragic golden-haired hero of Little Bighorn, the brave soldier who fell surrounded, the stuff of paintings. Very romantic. Less romantic is what he did first. At dawn on the Washita River, he attacked a sleeping Cheyenne village, striking women, children, and the elderly while they were defenseless in their beds. That's not a heroic last stand. That's the same man earlier, doing the ambushing. Little Bighorn wasn't a martyrdom. It was a bill coming due. The paintings show him nobly outnumbered. They somehow never show the sleeping camp he hit when the numbers were the other way. 34. Frank Sinatra. Old Blue Eyes, the chairman of the board, the smoothest voice in American music, pure cool, iconic. What the tuxedo shine glosses over is decades of documented entanglement with organized crime figures, mob connections that followed him his entire career. In the clubs, the deals, the friendships. The velvet voice ran through a lot of very shady rooms. He crooned about doing it his way, and a fair chunk of that way apparently ran straight through the underworld. The romance of the era loves the swagger. It's much quieter about who owned the venues where the swagger got paid. 35. Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier, the coonskin cap legend who died swinging his rifle at the Alamo, the ultimate go-down fighting hero. Stirring. Except some accounts, notably the De La Peña diary, say it didn't happen that way. That Crockett actually surrendered and was executed afterward, not killed in the blaze of glory. Now, historians still argue this one hard, but the possibility alone rattles the whole legend because the myth needs him swinging to the end. Turns out the frontier hero's most famous moment might have a very different, much quieter ending. Legends hate an asterisk almost as much as they hate surrender. 36. Woodrow Wilson, the scholarly president, the Nobel Peace Prize idealist, the professor who dreamed up the League of Nations. Very high-minded. Here's the ugliness the Ivy League plaques skip. He resegregated the federal government, rolling back years of black advancement, and he screened the pro-KKK film The Birth of a Nation in the White House, reportedly praising it. The great progressive intellectual used his power to push black Americans backward and gave a Klan recruitment tool the presidential seal of approval. The Peace Prize idealist had a very specific idea of whose peace mattered. Turns out, self-determination came with a color code. 37. John Adams, the principled founding father, the honest defender of the revolution, the guy the Prestige miniseries made downright cuddly. Noble stuff? What the tribute skips is that he signed the Alien and Sedition Acts, which literally jailed newspaper editors for the crime of criticizing him. Criticizing the president, he locked people up for printing opinions he didn't like, in the brand new land of free speech. The champion of liberty tried out authoritarianism roughly 10 minutes after the ink dried on the whole Freedom Project. Nothing defends a fragile democracy like immediately arresting the guys with the printing press. Real founding father behavior. 38. Eli Whitney, the clever inventor of the cotton gin, the schoolbook symbol of American ingenuity, the machine that changed everything. It sure did. Here's the grim twist they underplay. The gin was supposed to reduce the need for slave labor, and instead, it made cotton so profitable that slavery exploded across the entire South, entrenching it for generations. His clever little machine didn't ease human bondage, it supercharged it. And the cherry on top, he barely made any money off it because everyone copied the design. So the great inventor accidentally turbocharged slavery and went broke doing it. Ingenuity. 39. Jay Gould, the great railroad tycoon, the Gilded Age Titan. One of those names that gets called a captain of industry. Impressive. Less impressive is how he tried to corner the entire U.S. gold market, a scheme that triggered the Black Friday Panic of 1869 and financially ruined thousands of ordinary people overnight. He tried to privately hijack the nation's gold supply for personal profit and blew up the economy doing it. The captain of industry was really more of a captain of, I will crash the country if it makes me richer. But we called it business genius, so it's fine. 40. Wyatt Earp, the legendary lawman, the steely marshal of the OK Corral, the incorruptible symbol of frontier justice. Very upstanding. What the badge polishing skips is his own rap sheet. In his youth, he was arrested for horse theft, and he had documented ties to brothels throughout his career. The great symbol of law and order spent a decent chunk of his life on the other side of it. The line between famous lawman and guy who got arrested out west was mostly about who was telling the story later. Earp just made sure the story got told by his side. 41. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, the tortured genius, the man the whole prestige movie bowed to. Brilliant, tragic, iconic. Here's the twist the mythology loves to skip. After handing America the most powerful weapon on Earth, the government turned on him, stripped his security clearance, and branded him a suspected communist. The man who built their bomb got treated like a threat the moment his conscience got loud. Nothing says gratitude like recruiting a genius to end a war and then blacklisting him for having second thoughts. Build us a god, get shown the door. Very American thank you note. 42. Walt Whitman, the great American poet, the bard of democracy, the sensitive soul behind Leaves of Grass, taught with reverence in every classroom. Beautiful. Here's the deeply unserious secret. He anonymously wrote glowing reviews of his own book, praising himself to the skies while pretending to be a neutral critic. He was out here catfishing the literary world with rave reviews of himself. The father of American verse was basically running sock puppet accounts before the internet existed. The soaring voice of democracy also had a side hustle in, have you heard about this genius Walt Whitman? Astonishing range, honestly. 43. General Sherman, the Union war hero, the man who won the war with his famous march, the tough, decisive general. Bold. What the tidy version underplays is that his march to the sea deliberately burned civilian homes, farms, and whole towns across Georgia, torching the livelihoods of ordinary people to break the South's will. That wasn't collateral damage. It was the strategy. Terror as policy, aimed squarely at civilians. Now, war is ugly, and this one had a righteous cause. But Hero glosses over the fact that his signature move was systematically setting fire to people's lives. Effective? Sure. Heroic gets complicated when the target is farmhouses. 44. Norman Rockwell, the painter of wholesome America, the cozy Thanksgiving tables, the freckled kids, the whole warm apple pie fantasy. Comforting. Behind those impossibly sunny paintings, though, was a man who battled deep depression and sought psychiatric treatment, aching to create the very warmth he couldn't always feel. The guy who defined American happiness on canvas was privately fighting a heavy darkness. There's something quietly devastating about it. He painted the family dinner everyone wished they had, partly because he was reaching for it too. Not a scandal, just a reminder. The man selling us cozy was off canvas, often anything but. 45. Pocahontas, the smiling Disney princess, the free-spirited girl who fell in love and painted with the colors of the wind. Adorable. The real story is a horror the cartoon buried. She was a child when the English knew her, later kidnapped by colonists as a young woman, held for ransom, pressured into conversion and marriage, shipped to England as a living advertisement, and dead by around age 21. There was no windswept romance. There was a captured girl who never made it home. We turned a kidnapping and death into a musical with a talking raccoon. Somewhere, that's got to be a new low. 46. Teddy Roosevelt, the rugged Rough Rider, the big stick hero, the conservationist cowboy carved into an actual mountain. Larger than life. Here's a piece the granite leaves off. In the Brownsville affair, he dishonorably discharged 167 black soldiers without trial over an incident many of them were flatly innocent of. Wiped out their careers, pensions, and honor on flimsy evidence, no hearing, nothing. The great champion of the square deal handed 167 men a raw one and never looked back. It took decades and a later administration to clear their names. But sure, let's keep the guy's face on the mountain. Big stick, small justice. 47. John Hancock, the man with the giant signature, the bold patriot who signed his name so King George could read it without glasses. Pure revolutionary swagger. Iconic. What the flourish distracts from is that he built his enormous fortune while being widely suspected of large-scale smuggling to dodge British taxes. The famous principled rebel had a very personal financial reason to hate British customs officers. His revolutionary fire ran suspiciously parallel to his shipping profits. Turns out that legendary signature belonged to a guy who may have been protecting his contraband margins as much as his liberty. Nothing signs a rebellion like a wounded bottom line. 48. Samuel Morse, the inventor of the telegraph, the man who connected America, the father of the code that tapped out modern communication. Visionary. Here's the part the invention worship skips. Off the clock, he was a fierce anti-Catholic nativist who publicly defended slavery and even ran for office on a hateful, xenophobic platform. The man who linked the country together spent his spare time trying to decide which Americans deserved to belong in it. He wired the nation for messages while personally broadcasting some genuinely vile ones. ... apparently also spelled out a lot of bigotry. Great range. Terrible values. 49. Ray Kroc, the visionary founder of McDonald's, the milkshake machine salesman who built a global empire, celebrated in his own glossy movie. Inspiring hustle. One tiny detail the success story soft pedals. He didn't found McDonald's. The McDonald brothers did. Kroc bought in, then muscled them out of their own company, their own restaurant, and eventually their own name, reportedly stiffing them on a handshake royalty deal that would have been worth a fortune. He even opened a competing store to squeeze the original. The founder mostly founded the art of taking credit for other people's work. But hey, bootstraps, right? 50. Wild Bill Hickok, the Deadeye gunslinger, the coolest shot in the West, the legend who never missed. Terrifying reputation. Here's the tragic reality the tall tales bury. During an 1871 gunfight in Abilene, he accidentally shot and killed his own deputy and friend, Mike Williams, who was running in to help him. The greatest gunfighter alive gunned down the one man on his side. He was reportedly haunted by it for the rest of his life. The myth is, he never missed. The truth is his most famous shot hit exactly the wrong person. Legends leave out the bullets that land in a friend. 51. Thomas Migley. Okay, you've probably never heard his name, but you've breathed his legacy, and that's the problem. This brilliant inventor gave the world not one but two of the most destructive products in history: leaded gasoline, which poisoned the air and the brains of entire generations, and CFCs, which punched a hole in the ozone layer. One man, two planet-scale catastrophes. He was celebrated as a genius in his day. In hindsight, he might be the single most environmentally damaging human who ever lived. Some heroes cure diseases. This one basically invented two of them and got a medal for it. 52. Cesar Chavez, the beloved labor hero, the farm workers' champion. Si se puede. the face on murals, and a whole holiday. Genuine icon, real fights won, but the mural version skips an uncomfortable chapter. His union reported undocumented strikebreakers to immigration authorities to protect its strikes, essentially turning migrants over to be deported. The great defender of the vulnerable, at times, threw the most vulnerable under the bus to win the labor war. It's a genuinely hard, complicated piece of his story, but the saintly poster leaves it off entirely because champion of the workers reported workers to ICE doesn't fit neatly on a t-shirt. 53. Benedict Arnold. His name is literally American slang for traitor, the ultimate villain, the guy you compare backstabbers to. Here's the twist history buried under the hate. Before the betrayal, he was one of the most brilliant and courageous generals the revolution had, winning crucial battles, getting badly wounded for the cause, arguably doing more to secure early American victory than half the men on your money. Then he got passed over, disrespected, and drowning in debt, and he flipped. We remember only the treason. A genuine war hero got flattened into a single word. History's an unforgiving editor. 54. Judy Garland. America's sweetheart, Dorothy herself, the wholesome girl who sang about somewhere over the rainbow. Beloved. What the ruby slippers hide is genuinely dark. As a child star, the studio fed her amphetamines to keep her working and barbiturates to make her sleep, controlled her eating, and basically chemically ran a little girl like a machine. They fueled a child with uppers and downers to protect a shooting schedule. The bright-eyed magic you grew up on was built on the systematic drugging of a kid. The rainbow was real. The horror underneath it, powering the whole thing, was too. 55. Meriwether Lewis, the fearless explorer of Lewis and Clark, the hero who mapped the American West, the guy on every expedition mural. Adventurous. What the triumphant trail maps never mention is the ending. Just a few years after his legendary journey, at only 35, he died from gunshot wounds along a lonely road, widely believed to have been suicide. The man who conquered a continent couldn't survive the quiet that came after. He struggled with depression and debt, and dark spells the whole time. The explorer we celebrate for opening the West ended it alone in the dark. Glory's a lousy travel companion. 56. Ulysses S. Grant. The Union war hero, the general who won it all, the two-term president on the $50 bill. Big legacy. Here's a stain. The currency skips. In 1862, he issued General Order No. 11, expelling all Jews from the vast territory under his command, blaming them collectively for black market trading. An entire people ordered out en masse by decree. Lincoln personally canceled it, thankfully. Grant later regretted it, to his credit. But for a moment, one of America's great heroes signed off on a straight-up act of mass anti-Semitic expulsion. The bill shows the medals. It's very quiet about the order. 57. Alexander Hamilton, the scrappy founding father genius, the guy who got a smash hit musical and a whole new generation of fans. Beloved now. Here's a detail the show actually kept, because it was too wild to cut. Caught in an affair, Hamilton chose to defend himself by publishing a detailed pamphlet confessing the entire thing to the whole country in print voluntarily. He aired his own affair to prove he wasn't a financial crook. America's first great political sex scandal was entirely self-published by the guy in it. The brilliant strategist looked at a scandal and thought, what this needs is more detail, distributed nationally. Genius move. Truly. 58. The Wright brothers. The humble bicycle mechanics who gave humanity flight. The sweetest, most wholesome origin story in American invention. Adorable. What the museum diorama skips is what they did next. They waged such aggressive, relentless patent lawsuits against every rival and improver that they effectively strangled American aviation development for nearly a decade. While Europe raced ahead building better planes, the brothers were in court suing everyone who tried. They invented flight and then spent years trying to make sure nobody else could improve on it. The heroes of the sky basically kept the sky locked up with lawyers. Wholesome. 59. Leland Stanford, the great railroad baron, the visionary, the guy with an entire elite university named after him. Prestigious. Here's the foundation nobody engraves on the campus gates. His transcontinental railroad fortune was built on Chinese laborers who did the deadliest work for the lowest pay, died by the hundreds in the mountains and snow. and were then almost entirely erased from the story, right down to the famous photo they weren't invited to. The wealth funding, that shiny university sits on a mass grave nobody named. The West wasn't won. It was built by people the winners deliberately cropped out of the picture. 60. John Brown, the fiery abolitionist hero, the martyr who died fighting slavery, genuinely on the right side of the biggest moral question in American history. Real conviction. But the saintly version skips the Potawatomi massacre. In 1856, Brown and his men dragged 5 pro-slavery settlers out of their homes at night and hacked them to death with broadswords. Not a battle, an execution of civilians in the dark. Now he was fighting an unspeakable evil, and that context matters enormously. But right cause and hacked men to death in front of their families can both be true. History rarely hands you a clean hero. 61. Dr. Walter Freeman. You won't find him on any hero poster, but he was celebrated as a medical pioneer in his day, so he counts. This visionary popularized the ice pick lobotomy, jamming a metal spike through people's eye sockets to scramble their brains. And he did it thousands of times, often in minutes, sometimes as a roadshow. One of his victims was a 12-year-old boy. He wrecked countless lives and was applauded as a genius while doing it. Some doctors take an oath to do no harm. This one turned harm into a traveling act and got magazine profiles for it. 62. Martin Luther King Jr. A genuine hero. Full stop. A man who changed the world and deserves every bit of reverence. So let's be careful here, because this one's a real footnote, not a takedown. A Boston University panel concluded that portions of his doctoral dissertation were plagiarized. The university reviewed it and found significant copied material, though they chose not to revoke the degree. It doesn't touch the movement, the courage, or the moral weight of what he did. But it's true, it's documented, and the polished statue tends to skip it. Even genuine giants have paperwork they'd rather you didn't read. 63. General Curtis LeMay, the tough World War II air power hero, the no-nonsense commander, the guy who got results. Results is one word for it. He ordered the firebombing of Tokyo, which killed roughly 100,000 people in a single night, mostly civilians, burning a city built of wood into an inferno. And here's the chilling part. He flatly admitted that if America had lost the war, he'd have been prosecuted as a war criminal. He knew. He said it out loud. The hero framing only works because the winners write the trials. He wasn't confused about what he did. History just decided not to press charges. 64. Ty Cobb, the baseball legend, the fierce competitor, one of the greatest to ever play the game, an original Hall of Famer. Iconic. What the highlight reel skips is the day he climbed into the stands and beat a heckler, kicking and punching a man who, it turned out, had lost most of his hand and couldn't defend himself. When people yelled that the guy had no hands, Cobb reportedly said he didn't care. The all-time great pummeling a disabled fan in the bleachers isn't in the plaque. Turns out fierce competitor was doing a lot of heavy lifting for attacked a man with no hands. 65. Jim Bowie, the frontier legend, the Alamo hero, the man with the famous knife named after him, pure rugged Texas mythology. Cool. Here's the part the legend quietly sheathes. He made much of his money as a slave smuggler, working with the pirate Jean Lafitte to sneak enslaved people into the country and game a legal loophole for profit. The rugged frontier hero's fortune came from trafficking human beings alongside an actual pirate. That famous knife has a whole aesthetic built around it. The business behind the man holding it was about as far from heroic as the frontier got. 66. JFK, the Golden President, Camelot itself, the vigorous young hero radiating health and vitality on every magazine cover. That image was carefully manufactured. Behind it, he secretly suffered from Addison's disease and a wrecked back, and took a heavy cocktail of drugs, steroids, painkillers, and stimulants just to function, all hidden from a public sold the picture of a perfect specimen. The most vigorous-looking man in America was often in serious pain and quietly medicated to the eyeballs. Camelot ran on a pharmacy nobody saw. The image was the achievement. The reality was a very sick man doing an excellent impression of a healthy one. 67. Thomas Paine, the man whose writing literally lit the fuse of the American Revolution, whose pamphlet Common Sense put the fire in the whole thing. Founding-level hero. And here's how a grateful nation repaid him. He died shunned, nearly broke, mocked for his later religious views, with only a handful of people bothering to show up to his funeral. The man who helped birth a country died as an afterthought in it. Everyone quoted his words and nobody returned his calls. Turns out you can hand a nation its independence and still get left off the guest list. America forgets fast. 68. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, the icon, and famously an anti-drug crusader who once showed up at the White House asking President Nixon to make him a federal narcotics agent, badge and all. Very patriotic. Tiny problem. While he was volunteering to fight America's drug war, he was himself deeply hooked on prescription pills, working through staggering quantities that would eventually kill him. The nation's would-be drug cop was one of its most medicated men. He wanted a badge to bust users while quietly being one of the biggest. The king's greatest performance might have been that meeting. 69. John Jacob Astor, one of America's very first tycoons, the great self-made fortune, the name that screams old money respectability. Distinguished. Here's the source of a chunk of that respectable wealth. He made serious money trading opium into China, helping fuel a drug crisis on the other side of the world to pad his American empire. The foundational family fortune, the one that bought the mansions and the legacy, was partly built on being an international drug dealer. Every self-made American success story tends to have a chapter written in something ugly. Astor's was written in opium, then quietly edited out of the family portrait. 70. Johnny Appleseed, the gentle barefoot wanderer, the folk hero who planted apple trees out of pure love, sowing sweetness across the frontier. Wholesome storybook stuff. Here's the unstorybook truth. The apples he planted were mostly inedible, sour little spitters that no one would ever bite into because they weren't for eating. They were for making hard cider and applejack liquor. Johnny Appleseed was, functionally, spreading booze across the frontier. The beloved children's book saint was basically running a decentralized moonshine supply chain. The way to God's love is through apples. Sure, if by apples you mean getting the whole frontier drunk. 71. Steve Jobs, the visionary genius, the turtleneck saint, the man reverently framed as a modern hero of innovation. Iconic. Here's the deeply unsaintly part. For years, he denied being the father of his own daughter, Lisa, even claiming in a court deposition that he was sterile and couldn't possibly be the dad, all while she and her mother struggled on public assistance. He named an entire computer after her while refusing to admit she was his. The genius who obsessed over getting every product detail perfect somehow couldn't get the most basic human thing right. The reality distortion field, it turns out, worked on paternity tests too. So there it is. 71 so-called heroes, and almost every single one had a closet stuffed with skeletons, slave teeth, secret pigeons, or the occasional accidentally set a forest on fire situation. Funny how the statues never mention any of it. Turns out hero mostly means the person whose PR team won. History didn't lie to you exactly, it just left out all the good parts. And that's the whole game here at Dumbest Things. We say the quiet parts out loud. So, if watching your childhood heroes get politely demolished is your idea of a good time, you know what to do. Hit subscribe. There are a lot more statues left to knock over. See you in the next one.